Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's Manulife Business Success Series webinar on attracting diverse talent. My name is Ian McLean, and I'm the President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. Before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge that we do live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples as we seek a renewed relationship based on a foundation of mutual understanding and respect. Today's session would not be possible without the continued support of our sponsors and partners. So a special thank you to our title sponsor for the Business Success Series, Manulife. Our platinum sponsor for the series is the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, and to this month's presenting sponsor, RBC. These organizations are committed to supporting our local economy and providing businesses with the resources and tools they need to thrive. Just before the session begins, I'd like to go over a couple of quick reminders. Please ensure that your microphone is muted through the presentation so we can reduce any background noise. If you have any questions that do come up throughout the session, you can type them into the question box on your control panel at any time. If they're tech related, a representative of the Chamber team will get back to you right away. And if they are for today's presenter, they'll be gathered throughout the session, and our speakers will do their best to answer any questions as soon as or throughout the presentation. All attendees will be sent a recording of today's presentation, and it will also be made available on the Greater KW Chamber website. I'd now like to invite Mohammed Ayaz Karim, Commercial Account Manager with RBC, to introduce today's speakers. Ayaz.
Thank you, Ian. RBC is proud to be this month's presenting sponsor of the Business Success Series. I have the privilege of introducing today's speaker panel. Anusha Neelakathan is a fervent, lifelong learner with a passion for helping people. Being an erudite HR professional with over 12 years of experience, she has experience working in recruitment, employee engagement and retention, performance management, and human resource policies. She has worked in a number of sectors ranging from education and healthcare to working as a diversity and inclusion analyst at Toyota Motor Manufacturing Canada. Her work on the development and implementation of all diversity programs and initiatives have been instrumental in steering the company to receive the prestigious diversity-related award, being named one of Canada's top employees for diversity. She recently accepted another role in the world of policing and looks forward to building inclusive workspaces along with supporting strong, diverse communities. Danny Besley is the Director of Marketing at Driver's Seat. She is a certified diversity leader and is extremely passionate about creating inclusive spaces and supporting diversity education. She is a member of the 2S LGBTQ+ community and has built a non-profit organization that helps educate organizations on how to be allied businesses and support minority communities and communicate that allyship to the community at large. She is currently getting her Chartered Marketer designation and holds a position on the Chamber Young Professionals Committee and the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Rebecca Schonhard is the Vice President, Commercial Financial Services for the Kitchener-Waterloo Cambridge market. In this role, she leads a best-in-class commercial team to maximize RBC's position in the market and bring the best of RBC to businesses, business owners, and their employees. Since joining RBC, Rebecca has held roles with private client credit, US management, wealth management in New York, international institutional sales, global asset management in Toronto, strategy with Global Wealth Services in Toronto, global trust business in the Caribbean, and with Enterprise Strategic Client Group in Toronto and London. Rebecca holds an MBA from Schulich School of Business and is a CFA charter holder as well. And moderating today's session is Carl Cadogan. Carl is currently the CEO of Reception House, Waterloo Region, an organization that welcomes and serves government-assisted refugees in the Kitchener-Waterloo region. Carl has a strong multidisciplinary background obtained in senior roles in the non-for-profit sector and in government. His career spans several years of professional practice, including community development, human resource, immigrant services, fundraising, and government relations. He has written and spoken extensively about diversity issues and has served as chair of the London Diversity and Race Relations Advisory Committee, the Metro Toronto Task Force on Race Relations and Policing, and on many other similar focused organizations and activities. Please join me in welcoming Carl.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Thank you for introducing the panelists, and thank you for my introduction. Let me begin by saying that over the last number of months, the Chamber has been looking at how we can improve the issue of diversity and looking at how organizations and the Chamber itself can focus on diversity and inclusion in all aspects of our work. The committee that we have, in which Danny is a member, has been looking at how we can highlight this issue in a broad way. And so this session is the second of our webinars, and we hope that this is something that people can learn from. And if there are any questions, you can put it in the chat box and you can send them directly to the Chamber. So I guess my first question is, I'll open it to any one of the panelists. And I know we always think of diversity and inclusion as one of those sort of principles or actions that people see as doing sort of good for the community. I think it is a business imperative, and I guess I'll put that question to the panelists. Have you thought of inclusion and diversity as a business imperative, and what does your organization, whether you work for a smaller organization or a larger organization, do to focus on either that business imperative aspect?
I think that I can start off, if that's okay. I think that we've always been advocating for diversity and inclusion as something that is it has tangible and intangible benefits to the business itself, and it's not just a nice thing to do. It actually has tangible and intangible effects on the workplace and the communities that we're trying to serve. So whether it is, there is definitely a return on investment if you look at it from that point of view, by hiring diverse talent and having them creating a more inclusive workspace, engaging the talent that you do have within the business. There are a lot of intangible benefits to having a diverse and more inclusive workspace. So as an organization, it is very important to start thinking about the business case and strategy for your own organization, and what are the things that would go into building up that business case. What is a market that we're trying to reach out to, and are we representing the communities that we live in? Are we able to hire talent that is representative of our communities? Are we, once they come into our organization, are we keeping them engaged by providing that inclusive workspace for them to be able to participate and bring their whole self to work, not just a part of themselves, but their whole self to work? So there are definitely a lot of benefits to creating that business case and analyzing and looking at the different pieces that indicate what that means for your organization, whether your organization has an aging workforce, or whether where your skills are where you're gonna be able to find those skills to replace talent within the organization as well.
Okay, thank you, Anusha. Rebecca, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I sure do. I would echo some of those points that you started us off with, Carl, that I think this is a business imperative. It's not just the right thing to do, but it's a smart thing to do. RBC really embraces the value of inclusion, noting that diversity is just a fact, whereas inclusion is more of an activity and behavior and mindset. And so we think, and you can find all sorts of studies on this. Diverse teams come up with more innovative and creative and greater problem-solving skills than a monolith team. So allowing an inclusive group of employees to work together actually increases our own internal performance. So smarter teams make better decisions. Diverse teams are smarter teams. So that's pretty clear. It also means those employees that are, if they're feeling fully included, they can bring their best selves and their full selves to work. And so that problem solving and commitment is uninhibited, which is really important. From a client perspective, as Anusha was saying, you gotta walk and talk and sound and understand the full spectrum of your clients and your marketplace. So again, it's just a smart business decision to create an inclusive environment for all sorts of employees. But the third part that we haven't yet talked about is on that communities basis. And we're gonna find some of these forces that are at play on Bay Street are gonna trickle down to Main Street soon enough. So you're seeing movements where institutional investors like BlackRock, for instance, on a publicly traded company like RBC, they're setting investment standards wherein there needs to be a certain level of diversity, both gender and otherwise, within their board of directors, because they're seeing those companies outperform those with monolith leadership. And we're, as our whole systemic culture becomes more and more woke to some of these issues with Black Lives Matter and the rest, you're going, and Me Too, Idle No More, continues on and on. You're going to see those pressures start to trickle down into our Main Street businesses as well. So again, it makes strong business sense to embrace this early.
Thank you, Rebecca. Danny?
Absolutely. Something we haven't touched on yet as well is just based on a very diverse population that we have in Canada and we have in this community. If you aren't encouraging diversity or creating an inclusive space or ensuring that you're attracting that talent, you're actually going to lose a huge percentage of the market that you potentially could have holding roles in your organization. You're going to lose a large number of potentially very talented individuals that could potentially be a great asset to your organization if you're limiting yourself to smaller markets.
Thank you. And one of the things that sometimes happen when you have discussions with especially small companies, small organizations, and the chamber, more than half of the chamber's membership are companies that have less than 20 employees. Sometimes they talk about they want to attract more diverse talent, but they say, how do you do that? Like, where do I look? Where do I search for people? What would you give them? How could you help them to think about looking at different ways to attract diverse talents? And what have you done in your roles? Let's start with Danny, maybe.
Sure.
What have you done in your role to try to attract a diverse talent to your organization?
I think the first thing that has to happen is the organization has to be clearly making a commitment to having value in inclusion. It needs to be part of their values. It needs to be a part of who they are fundamentally. If a young individual is looking at joining an organization to start their career, they're going to want to be a part of an organization that has individuals that represent their identities as well, or has very clear understanding that their identity has value. If you have a young BIPOC member looking for a role and they join an organization where they're the only BIPOC member, that can be intimidating, and definitely and you want to create and cultivate an environment where they know their opinion is valued, they know that their perspective is valued, and that it's a space where they can be 100% authentic. I love what Rebecca said about that, creating spaces where you can be 100% yourself to encourage productivity, but also to part of this is about retention too. Staffing has been a long problem for a long time, and it costs money, and turnover costs training dollars, and keeping people longer means keeping them happy and allowing them to stay mentally sound, feel valued, feel included, and all of that comes from the top down, where you are setting that in the organization's values from day one.
Good. Okay, that sounds good. Anusha?
I definitely echo what Danny said about creating that inclusive workspace initially, and people need to be able to see that your organization is inclusive. So even simple things like reviewing, if you have a website, review the website. Do you have people that are representative of what your organization is? Do people see themselves? Are there women on your website? Are there people that are representing opposite stereotypes that we have known to get accustomed to? Are you looking at those aspects on your website? Do you have more women represented? Just for people to go on when they're applying to positions, are they seeing these things on your website? Is the language that you have inclusive? Are your job posting languages inclusive? Or are they having language that can seem potentially polarizing or non-inclusive to certain groups of members? Beyond that, I think that all organizations, small, medium-sized, are, as Danny mentioned, recruitment is a huge problem. We have a shortage in skills. The labor force growth rates are much slower than what they were probably 10 or 15 years ago. So recruitment, finding that right talent has always been a difficult point. So there are specific job boards that are targeted towards certain groups of people or certain underrepresented populations. Are we looking at these job boards to post our different positions rather than just going on maybe Indeed or any of the other ones that are well known? Are we looking at partnering with some of these other organizations that are targeted to represent some underrepresented populations? I know there are many that support people who are indigenous or people with disabilities or people that might be visible minorities. There are a lot of targeted job boards and organizations that support these individuals and help employers find the right talent from amongst that talent pool. So to really look deeper and partner with some organizations as well.
Thank you. And Rebecca, RBC is a big organization, and I know you probably have a lot of strategies to attract a diverse pool. So what are some of the things that you do?
Carl, we're at an advantage, right? If I'm posting a role, I've got the brand of the biggest financial institution in Canada behind it. But it's not enough. That's not a magic wand that provides me, a diverse array of talent. And so, a couple of things that I'd share to help, thinking if it's a challenge for me with this huge brand, my goodness, what can we do to help Main Street here in Kitchener-Waterloo to have diverse recruitment? So the first place I'd point you to is RBC's own diversity and inclusion website. If you just Google RBC diversity and inclusion, we have a public-facing website where we've got all sorts of resources. If you scroll the bottom of the page, there's self-assessments, there's podcasts, there's videos, there's research papers, all intended to help other institutions, small, medium, and large, with their diverse, setting up an inclusive environment for a diverse workforce. We've had great success. All, Fortune 500 companies have used some of these resources that we've put forward, and they're available for free to anyone who wants them. So check that out. But on the recruitment side, there's studies that would suggest that Adler Group recently said 85% of jobs are now filled by your network. Who do you know? And if you take a look within your network, and everyone you're touching within your workplace and social environment kind of looks and sounds the same, then there's a great opportunity to expand your network in a meaningful way. And so what I've done within our part of RBC is it's not enough to wait to the job posting. You have to move upstream. And if that networking component is so important, coupled with another theme that I love, which is mentorship, I've actively looked to start early stage career conversations with young women, men, and visible minorities within RBC, so we can start telling them about the commercial story and helping them grow their careers in places that they probably hadn't thought about before. So it's not only that mentorship idea, it's not only incredibly personally rewarding, it's great for the business, and it's helpful for those people to help navigate their career as well.
Okay, thank you. I think sometimes as we are doing sort of initiatives like inclusion, diversity, our staff need to know that we are doing something. Sometimes it's not easy to see that we're doing a lot of work. And so I guess the next question is, have you had any candidates or even employees who question you about your diversity and inclusion in your organization? Have someone has come out and said, I see your great website, but what are you really doing? And maybe they see very little change. And how do you respond to questions like that? I put that to, let's start with Anusha.
I think more and more people are becoming aware of the need to see changes. I have seen both candidates and employees reach out and say, why are we not doing this, or are we doing anything in this space? Look at what we're seeing on the outside. In our communities, there's a lot of voices being heard from many underrepresented groups. Are we, as a company, are we taking a stand about this, or what are we, what is our messaging system? So I think, in response to that, a lot of this is just one, when you're developing any type of a strategy or a plan towards diversity and inclusion and creating those inclusive workspaces, involve employees. I mean, the inclusion is to ensure that everybody is able to bring their whole self to work. So involve them, whether it's through focus groups or by putting something out there for them to see a business strategy or a business case. Involve the employees. And with regards to candidates are being a lot more vocal these days about the information that is being collected. A lot of organizations right now are collecting candidate information, diversity dimension information, to be able to better serve, understand gaps, and better serve the communities that they are attracting the talent from. So very simply put, be able to be transparent and provide reasoning as to why you're collecting this data, because sometimes it might come across that, candidates might not want to provide this information for the fear of, being discriminated against or so during the whole hiring process. So I think the messaging needs to come across consistently and in an open and transparent manner, so people are able to see this message that you want to be, as an organization, inclusive and welcoming to diversity.
Okay.
Can I add something? Sorry, Rebecca.
Absolutely.
I think as well, these minority groups and feminist groups, they are hypercritical, and they're critical for a reason. So I think, especially knowing the smaller organizations that exist within the chamber, you have to be open to that feedback and not let it hit you personally, but see it as an opportunity for that change. Someone who's giving you that feedback is giving it to you for a reason. And if you don't see the value today, you will see the value tomorrow or next week or next year. And that feedback needs to be accepted with open arms and really invited. So if someone says, I think we could do more for this, listen to them, find out how. If someone's critical about what your representation on your website or your social media or your hiring, and listen to that feedback, because if one person's thinking of it, someone else maybe too who's not voicing it. So that person who's voicing it should be thank you'd and should be really appreciated, because they're giving you an opportunity to be better, giving you an opportunity to improve. And that's something I've learned a lot over the past year is, as we've started to dive into this committee and dive into this community, is that there's very few organizations that are perfect. And even today, with all the advances, maybe none, even today with all the advances that we've made, there's still so much more to go. There's still so much movement to make, whether you're small, medium, or large organization. And even as a civilization, as a community, there's more to do. So continuously being accepting of, verbiage is going to change, communication is going to change. How we're open to indigenous values are going to change, and what we're doing in the community for that's going to continue to grow and adapt. And every single day, you have to say, listen, and like Rebecca said, look at your network and create conversation with people who live in the space, who are passionate about it, because they're the ones who are going to give you that open feedback as well. And they're the ones that you can have the conversation and say, I don't know if I'm there yet, but how can I get there based on your recommendation? And I want to give Carl a shout out for that, because he's always someone great that's always really open to giving feedback and saying, asking for that feedback is the first step on going the right direction. And without people like him and individuals on this panel, you lose opportunity to get even that much better every single day.
Thank you, Danny. Rebecca, I know you wanted to make a comment about this.
Yeah, of course I did. I think those people that are questioning and demanding more are keeping us better and helping us to improve. So like Danny said, it's a wonderful thing to have those critics. It's, to put it in perspective, our CEO, every Ask Me Anything he has, so 80-odd thousand employees across the globe of RBC, there is always a question voted very high from our employees about diversity and inclusion, and what meaningful steps are we taking to help, with the Truth and Reconciliation Commitment 92, how are we pushing that forward? Like very specific accountabilities. And it's wonderful, but if you look at, millennials just turned 40, so, a good, nearly half our workforce are 40 or and under now, and there's all sorts of suggestions out there that demographic is much more values-based in its decision making. So they're looking to align not just the right salary expectations, but rather the right values, and are looking for people organizations to be held accountable to those values. So it's not enough to talk the talk. No organization is perfect, as Danny said, but you've got to, a little bit put your money where your mouth is, whether that's engaging locally with an organization outside of your normal sphere. So working at partnering with the Ashmanabig outreach group here in town, for instance, or at RBC on an enterprise level, making a commitment to $100 million specifically for young Black entrepreneurs with provision of mentorship around that. So you can do things on a big scale, but you can also make them intimate. Anyway, it's huge that we put our money where our mouth is, I think, as well.
That's good. Thank you very much. The question that just sort of came to mind as you were speaking. I know that companies, large and small organizations, companies are going to sort of artificial intelligence. They're going to processes that in their recruiting. So you send a resume in, and there's some formula that sort of picks out the ones that go to the HR lead. In a lot of cases, people like me and people who are from racialized communities or from sort of religious minorities that are applying for positions, it's somehow some of this artificial intelligence, some of this processes somehow does not include those people. Those people get sort of pushed to the side when you depend on systems that aren't or has built into them some kind of discriminatory practices, because you have to do something in a system to get to the point where you get people coming in. And sometimes, people you want to attract are the ones that are getting kind of sidelined. And so are you using sort of technology in your recruitment, or are you doing it sort of more of the old-fashioned way? I know that there are times when there are people that sort of they didn't use their full name on resumes because it was a name that was obviously foreign, and people thought that those names of those people weren't included. So are you using some of that technology to recruit, or are you a combination of strategies? And how much do you use your internal people to help you recruit new candidates?
Oh, it's a many-layer cake here, Carl. So we've got, I suppose there's some sort of AI machinery, but it's not necessarily screening out candidates that I wouldn't see them to the application pool, but saying, hey, here's who we think based on experiences in the top cut, second cut, third cut. But I can go through and do every resume individually. I absolutely use my team to help promote and use their networks and engage with their friends and family to find other awesome people to come join. So that's helpful. And we help each other within neighboring markets within RBC as well. But I would, putting a really fine point on it here, like I would not show up to my hiring committee call not having had ensured rather that the panel that was interviewing these candidates was diverse in gender and racial background. That's a must-have. It's a must-have that at least 50% of my top candidates are, there's got to be an equal split of genders there. There's got to be representation from visible minority groups, and not on a tokenism basis. That's part of my mandate and how I'm evaluated as a leader for RBC, which is why that upstream mentorship, engagement, and diverse networking is so important to allow me to be successful in my role and for the bank to build out these inclusive teams.
Good, thank you. Anusha?
I would agree. I think that there are applicant tracking systems that get very specific, but I've done a lot of recruiting in my career up until now, and a lot of the systems that I've used tend to bring up based on your resume, like the key skills and experiences and education and those particular filters. So I think that when applicants are applying or when you're recruiting, it's very important to specify those skills and experiences that relate to the job posting itself. I don't believe that most job postings most of the applicant tracking systems themselves tend to filter out based on names per se, but I think it's more to do with the skills. However, there are a lot of studies, to your point, Carl, that point to show when there are people actually probably the AI is a lot less discriminatory than when people are doing the recruitment, because there are studies that have shown that when recruiters actually have been presented with the exact same resume with two different names, one that was a very familiar name that was very common, and one that was probably a foreign sounding name, they were more likely to pick the one that was more familiar to them. So there's a lot of unconscious biases that are at play with humans recruiting versus AI recruiting. So AI recruiting, I guess, with the applicant tracking systems is not that bad, but I would make it a point that anybody who is part of the hiring process, whether it is people in human resources or recruitment or the hiring managers or whoever is involved with that process, undergo some type of unconscious bias training, and they become aware of these changes or biases that they might have. There are a number of resources available for them to take this, but I believe that, you know, once you become aware of it, then you are able to take steps to prevent that from progressing and, you know, subconsciously removing people from the candidate pool themselves.
Okay, thank you. And Danny?
Once again, speaking from the lens of a smaller organization, having individuals in recruiting roles who represent those minority communities matter. I did a conversation for Black History Month with our HR generalist, who is a man of color, and he spoke about his experience coming over from Nigeria, having a very unique name, working in the HR field, which is primarily females, you know, just his experience in all those pieces. And I mean, something he spoke to as well was pronunciation of a name, and how, you know, individuals can be uncomfortable if they don't know how to pronounce a name. And so it's easier for them to choose a name they understand than to choose one that might make someone uncomfortable. So, you know, that pulling that bias out and saying, you know, and I mean, for myself, every time I interview someone, I always ask them first thing for the pronunciation of their name and for their pronouns. And that's my standard practice. It doesn't matter if it's a name that I know or understand. I do every single time across the board to give everyone an opportunity to share how they want their name pronounced. And especially in a virtual world when people's names are written down, so, you know, people don't get the opportunity to introduce themselves the same way anymore. So allowing them to introduce themselves and how they identify, I think has pulled some of that bias out, and that's just a small step that I've made to move the needle on that. But yes, I think, like Rebecca and Anuja said, it comes down to having people who represent those communities in your HR positions too, not just in your board roles, not just in your marketing roles, but also in recruitment roles as well.
Thank you. So much has changed over the last year. We've all been, you know, people are working from home, and people are interviewing like the way we are talking now. Has that improved your recruitment efforts in terms of diversity, or has it lessened the efforts? Is there been an impact one way or another because of the fact now you're using technology to recruit folks?
I think that there has definitely been an impact to recruitment efforts because of this. We not only have to take into consideration people's visible differences when they are, you know, interviewing for positions, but we're also talking about invisible differences or the diversity dimensions that are under that iceberg. And some of them are people are not comfortable being on a camera. To be able to talk to people. They like the human interaction. So their performance in an interview might be impacted by being on the other side of a camera without being able to see reactions. So I think that it is difficult with online or virtual interviews where people are not able to see each other. But I also think that it presents some form of an opportunity. It does give us the options where, you know, recruiters or hiring managers are not presented with all diversity. We're removing a part of what diverse dimensions might be available from being in person to just being virtual. So they are able to be with a more open mind, recruit and go through that whole hiring process.
Okay. Danny?
I agree that I think it could go both ways. I think it's difficult. You know, you're interviewing potentially a mother and child comes up and is interrupting the process. Well, how does that not influence your situation? This is your home life for a long time. Home and work have been kept very separate, and you don't have that opportunity anymore. So I think there's a creation of new biases that can exist, and it could be the same thing as someone not having a home office. They're working from their bedroom. Is that going to affect whether you hire this person or not? And then on the other end, you know, potentially things like clothing might affect less because you're really only seeing from here up. So, you know, so that might not affect, you know, ableism might not be affected as much due to that. But it is definitely, there's advantages and disadvantages. I think that if you're someone who is recruiting remotely, you have to be aware that the circumstances at home are going to be different, and you can't be affected by, you know, potentially the roommate coming in and slamming doors and making a ruckus. That's not the entire experience of who that person is. It's only a snapshot.
Thank you. Rebecca?
Nope. Carl, I'm not seeing such a huge difference. There's challenges and imperfections with in-person recruiting, just as there are on a virtual basis. Danny, you know, those photo bombs of family and friends, I love those in my team meetings. It makes it fun and real, and that's what we're all dealing with right now. So it's okay to have a smile over it. But, you know, the challenges of diverse recruiting existed prior to COVID and will exist after and during, so far as I'm concerned, and a place for us to continue to press into.
I think one thing I've heard from a friend who was just going through a recruiting process with an organization, working in the SaaS industry, group interviews for anybody, they're not working as well over Zoom, and I've been hearing that a lot. People are interrupting each other. With us, with this panel, you know, you're jumping in and out of mute, but imagine that with 6 very ambitious individuals who are trying to fight for a role. Group interviews don't seem to work in this setting.
Okay. I haven't heard about that actually, group interviews, but I guess it's a way of employers to talk to a whole lots of folks, especially if they have you do a posting and you get 200 responses, and you've got to find a way to kind of short list. So that's an interesting dimension.
They're used a lot in sales roles, but I think, I mean, if it comes down to, we're talking about the diversity, you know, there's lots of statistics that men will always be louder than women. They'll always feel more confident to be the first one to speak up. So it definitely can have some gender barriers in group interviews. I mean, I've personally never taken one, but I do know people a lot. It's common in the SaaS field for sales roles.
Yeah, and I think the point that I think Rebecca made earlier around panels is really the scariest thing. I think about once going into a job interview, and there were 8 people there, and not very diverse, but not very friendly. You know, nobody cracked a smile for an hour and a half, and that's very hard for you to take as someone who's already uncomfortable, because generally going to a job interview, nobody likes it. It's not like, people don't put it as number 1 favorite thing to do. People rather probably go to the dentist than to go to a job interview. So I think it's very challenging when you have to get into that situation, and you have to find a way as someone coming into an organization, one to come into an organization and being confronted by a large group of people. It's very disconcerting, but I think we have to find a way of working through that. And as employers think about it, that's one of the things that people need to think about. How can you make not just people from diverse communities, but how can you make potential candidates feel comfortable in applying for your position. I'm going to ask each of you to sort of, sort of give us some suggestions. If I think as we said, the chamber has 50% plus of their members have 20 or less staff. So if you're a small employer, this stuff is hard to do. What would be one or two recommendations you would give to some of the membership at the chamber in sort of getting on this sort of bandwagon, so to speak? Let me start with Danny this time.
With these smaller organizations, it's a small community. The personal brand of the leaders in the organization matters. So when whether you're a business owner or a manager in the organization, understand that your personal brand, like Rebecca said, who you're connected with, what events you're going to, individuals who are listening to this webinar now, be a part of these conversations and share your feelings and be open and transparent about your values as an individual, because that's part of, people want to work with people with like-minded values. And like us millennials, who I'm a part of that group. So we want to work with individuals who have the same values as us. We want to be mentored by individuals who have the same values as us. Your personal brand matters in that fact. So being an ally to the communities, whether you're a part of them or not, being an ally to those communities is important, and how you articulate that in your personal brand will affect how people see you with your organization, because if the community is too small. And with supporting small business, we're supporting small businesses because we know who the owner is, and we want to support them, and we're happy for them, and we're excited for their organization. So make sure that you are representing yourself, not just on your organizational website, but also on your LinkedIn and your Facebook or wherever else people can find you.
Okay, great. Rebecca?
Yeah, I'm thinking about three things. If you don't have the same sort of resources, well, goodness knows, RBC has a lot of resources around it. So first one is use ours. We've got this diversity and inclusion website. There's all sorts of podcast videos and resources there. So dig in and fill your boots. So that's the first step, I would say. The second step is explore new networks. Like, look at your own network and think about, is there a bit of a monolith going on? Because if there is, where and how can you explore new networks within your own community? And the third part is mentoring. Actively go out and find groups like Women in Communications and Technology here. The Waterloo chapter has mentoring circles. Maybe there's an opportunity for your organization to be a part of that, or another, either formal through the universities, the business schools, or otherwise. But engage in new ways.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that, the chamber has a number of things that happen all the time. So the chamber is one of those pathways that you can ensure you get connected to. You are paying your membership dues. You utilize the chamber to get connected to different groups. Anusha?
I absolutely agree with what both Danny and Rebecca said, but also as a small business, it's important to start somewhere, set small goals. There are a ton of resources available, as Rebecca said, a lot of free resources available from RBC, from a lot of other places. So even if it is smaller, but set small goals, make a small commitment towards achieving those goals for a particular period of time. So for the next year, these are the goals that we're going to be focusing on in the diversity and inclusion space, whether it means it's partnering with more organizations for targeted hiring strategies, or whether it is to create a more inclusive workspace by providing that engagement within the organization and people that work there. So whatever those goals are, to start small, set those goals, start small, and slowly work towards creating those spaces within the organization and in the community.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So I have a couple other questions, but I can't see the chat. So I wondered if there are any questions from the audience that we could.
Sorry, there isn't any. Let me just see here. There's just one here. So I guess one of the questions is, what are some great volunteer opportunities, either groups or committees, to join in the community for diversity and inclusion support? So I think that builds on a little bit of what I was hearing, but that's a question that's in the chat box.
So repeat that for me again, Ian.
So say, what are some of the great volunteer opportunities or groups or committees to join within the community for diversity and inclusion support?
Yeah. Okay. So I think I mentioned, the many opportunities through the chamber. That's one thing. I think that a couple of folks mentioned women in technology. There's I know there are sort of their HR. I'm not sure if it's called HRPAO, but the Human Resources Professional Group. They have a local group that meets, and it's sort of supportive. I think you can sort of make a leap sometimes by sort of reaching out to communities you're not familiar with. So if you are looking at Indigenous community, there's Indigenous Center at the university, sort of reaching out to them, and you're getting students who are in university and are looking for opportunities, whether it's full-time or part-time. It's a way of connecting, and the universities all have clubs, whether it's the African Students Association. So there are clubs that exist. So making an effort to connect to some of those opportunities. If you're a small company, that is really good. Kind of opening up your company to people who just want to talk to you to find out more about what you do. So if you have an anniversary, or you have a special day in your company, that you can sort of put the word out that you are open to giving people even a virtual tour of your company, the kind of work that you're doing. That's different ways of employers reaching out to the community, and you've got to try different things. If you try the same thing, you get the same results. So you've got to try different things and look at getting different results. Any comments? We've got another 5 minutes or so. We want to make sure that we finish on time. Any sort of final comments?
I build out on that brainstorming of resources, Carl, that there's also, Kitchener-Waterloo, the greater Waterloo area is a real beacon for newcomers to Canada. And KW has some groups oriented specifically to helping those newcomers meet with success. So it's a great place. Some of our own, in fact, Mohammed Ayaz, who introduced us, just recently volunteered at one of those events. And it's a great opportunity to, share the story of your business and let them know what it takes to be successful there. And you're going to probably meet some really talented, really experienced newcomers to Canada that just don't yet have Canadian experience. So what a win both ways.
Yeah, well, that's sort of my sort of specialty, the work that we do. And before this meeting, I was in a meeting about some of the work we've done around employment. And some of the employers in the community who have done extraordinary work to attract newcomers, and not only attract newcomers, but ensure that their workspace is welcoming and open to people who are new. This might be their first job in this country, and people have to learn, and you have to the onboarding might take a bit more time. You might have to do things that might be different that you've not done before, but you're giving people the tools so that they can be successful. So, if you've not worked in Canada before and you have to punch a time clock, if you've never seen one before, it's a different kind of reality for people. So I think, there are immigration partnership. There are a number of organizations in the community whose job it is to help support newcomers to the community. We are one of the organizations. Immigration Partnership is a partner with the Chamber, and there are other organizations in the community as well. So that's very important.
I just say, Carl, I think the Immigration Partnership, because it's got a lot of the connections with both the organizations that work with immigrants, but also connection with business, that there are some of the leading businesses that are doing that. So all the things you talked about, mentoring, there's opportunities to get connected, whether it's through, Nora knows everybody who's everybody in that space as a staff person, but there are people that and businesses and you know, the service providers where there's some of these tools as well.
Thank you. Anusha, any final words?
Oh, I think it's just reaching out to a lot of these organizations. I've probably been here only this year will be my 10th year, have pretty much gone through a lot of these different challenges that we've spoken about as someone who is an employee looking to get into an organization, as well as an employer that is looking to hire from them, but definitely networking and seeking mentorship within your own professional organizations helps a lot to build those networks and you know, find employment and also find recruits, find new hires.
What was your biggest challenge in 30 seconds when you've been here for 10 years, you got your first job? What was your biggest challenge when you started?
I think it was everything from understanding just the culture. It wasn't language for me. It was more the culture, or how the lingo, small talk, building those networks, and even things like understanding where to find these jobs, building those networks. Networking was something that was very new to me, and where the most jobs are really available. So networking and the international lack of international Canadian experience was one of the biggest challenges, I would say.
Thank you. And final word to you, Rebecca, before I bring Ian on.
Yeah, just I'm so grateful to be part of this conversation. RBC's one of our core values is diversity and inclusion, and it's a place that we continue to really put our shoulder behind. And while we've got lots of room to improve, it's helpful just even being part of conversations like this to learn from others and share ideas, so together we can move it forward. So thank you for the invitation.
Okay. Danny?
I think thank you for bringing up that point about, you know, people immigrating to Canada. I was able to have a conversation last week with a lot of our franchisees are new immigrants. So I spoke with several of them for our International Women's Month about being a woman in the business. And our one franchisee, Jeanette, came from Bahamas, and she said she struggled when she first came here because of a lack of Canadian experience. But, you know, and I think employers take that chance on that person, because give them the opportunity for mentorship and to bring them in. And I mean, we love creating opportunities for entrepreneurs in this country, which is great for us at Driver's Seat. And I think there's so much of that, and there's so many brilliant minds coming to Waterloo. So also look at the schools. There's great talent coming out of both universities and the college as well.
Thank you.
Once again, thanks for having me. Final thing is just learn the right language. Understand the value of your dialect and the dialogue that you're having, because there's lots you can do to create more inclusive spaces, and it takes work, and you have to practice every single day on having more inclusive dialogue and integrating that language into your nature. But once you start doing it, it becomes natural that not assuming someone's gender, and creating an opportunity for someone to introduce themselves and discuss mental health, and just being more open, and not making any assumptions out of the gate.
Thank you. And Ian, you have the final word.
Well, I'm just going to wrap up as we're up against the witching hour, but thank you to Anusha and Danny, Rebecca and Carl for spending time with us today. It's some tremendously valuable information. To Carl and Danny for your contribution to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. I think more than anything, putting effort in and being open to hearing what we need to do is the first step for any small business. And I think you've highlighted that small businesses can do things as well as our larger corporate partners as well. So thanks again to all of you. That does bring us to the end of today's session. Once again, I want to thank our tremendous partners and sponsors, to our title sponsor, Manulife, our platinum sponsor for the series, the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, to this month's presenting sponsor, RBC, and to today's speakers, Anusha, Danny, Rebecca, and Carl. Finally, to all of you for tuning in today. As a reminder, we host a new business success series every Wednesday at 1 p.m. We're taking a short break next week. It was supposed to be March break. It's not now, but we're still taking a break. We'll be back on March the 24th for 2020, a very different tax year, what you can expect in 2021. Really for yourself as an individual and a business to get on top of the COVID year and what impacts that's going to have on your business. And we'll be joined by Adam Postma of MNP, who will share with us what this means for all of these changes in COVID year mean for your business. For full details and to register, please visit greaterkwchamber.com. Please do share this series with your friends and colleagues, and join us every Wednesday afternoon for another edition of the Business Success Series. Because if it's Wednesday, it's the Business Success Series. Thanks so much and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.